Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome back to our entertainment show. As you know, we've been running a special feature now for well over 2 years, and is after a hugely successful season one that featured over 38 episodes. We were back for a season two and we're up on 57 episodes at the moment of our Stargate SG1 and our Stargate Atlantis and the whole Stargate franchise documentary, where we speak to renowned actors and actresses that have played many a role in Stargate and that sort of universe, whether it was the original movie with Kurt Russell, or there was the follow spin-off series in Stargate SG1 and Stargate Atlantis, and also way up to the new origins like Stargate Origin and the Stargate Command and Stargate Contorium as well. I'm delighted to be joined by one of the system lords now there, I say this evening, one of the prominent foes of Colonel Jack O'Neill, played by Richard Dean Anderson, and Amanda Tapping, Colonel Carter. She played one of the system lords. She was one of the Goulds, one of the most fearsome female Goulds of dare I say, of all time. She played Nirrti, the one and only Jacqueline Samuda. Jacqueline, first of all, fantastic to have you with us there this evening. And Nirrti, in terms of the character, she sort of was renowned, she was sort of feared in that sort of universe, but she certainly left a mark as well, in terms of she was always one of those type of enemies that she was so memorable, in terms of you could always remember her, she was never a forgettable character, dare I say.
Oh, I appreciate that she wasn't forgettable, and she shouldn't be. I mean, she was formidable. For one thing, she only really had one loyalty, and that was to herself. And her second loyalty was to science and to developing the ultimate Hoktar. And so she was quite ruthless. So everyone should fear her for sure.
Yeah, and when you originally saw the character and the script of the character, when it was pitched to you, had you certain ideas of how you want to go about it, how you want to portray it? I know obviously the voice was self-enhanced with self-enhanced technology, but in terms of your emotions, in terms of how you wanted to portray her as this sort of fierce woman, and almost like a Cleopatra, dare I say.
Yeah, and actually, even in the audition process, I was kind of given the suggestion by Brad Wright that there's almost a Shakespearean kind of height, that kind of seriousness and gravitas. And coming from a theater background, I connected to that right away. And then also just the whole fact that she is, an ancient Egyptian goddess, Hindu goddess rather. And so that 2,500-year-old character, I really loved the fact that there was the weight of all of those years, all of that history, developing her psyche and her physical presence. So there was quite an elevated kind of attitude to portraying her. And the audition process was actually quite interesting, and to get directed through that and do the call back. Then when I did my very first day on set, they were doing the hair and makeup tests. And honestly, a lot of actors will tell you, once you start inhabiting those clothes and that you get that hair, you get that makeup, it actually informs a lot of what you now play. And especially with the wardrobe that Nirrti had, it was so incredible. The actual fabrics that were used, the very first kind of chest plate, it was just cloth, but it was embedded with actually semi-precious stones. So once you put that on, it really gives you a great sense of importance. And I remember the hair and makeup test, I was then paraded in front of Richard Dean Anderson and he approved. He approved of it all. So we went from there.
I suppose in terms of getting that sort of seal of approval from Richard Dean Anderson, and obviously he was the star lead, but it was a prominent cast with Christopher Judge, with Amanda Tapping as well. But in terms of the sort of being that sort of nemesis, being that sort of foe, I spoke to a good lot of actors who played that sort of role. Were you always sort of made notice of when you were going to be used in terms of seasons, or were you made aware maybe a month or two in advance that they might need you maybe for 4 to 5 weeks for maybe 1 or 2 episodes, or how did it sort of work? Because you were a continuous sort of figure throughout the first few seasons, in terms of you would appear maybe halfway through the seasons.
Yeah, they actually don't give advance notice because they're still developing the scripts. So they don't want to, make promises to all the actors until they know exactly who the whole cast is. So in the very first episode I played, I think there was probably only 2 weeks notice before I went to set. And that 2 weeks after casting was a lot of costume fittings, because the costumes situation for Stargate is extremely detailed, and they build them like theater costumes. So they really start with like a muslin, and then they go from there and actually create the patterns and so on. So that 2 weeks is costume, and then you always get script changes as well. So they never stop developing. But I never had advance notice when I was going to play. I would just have a script sent to me, and I would be leafing through it to find Nirrti. And of course, I always wanted more, always wanted more. And then for the case of Metamorphosis, that had an interesting story, because I pitched a story to Brad Wright, and he said, "Oh, this is interesting. I want to take this into the writer's room." And lo and behold, the script arrives, and I'm given a story credit on it, and it was combined with some other principles that were kind of in play in the story room. And so, of course, I have a writing credit on the episode where my character dies. So when I got that script and I'm leafing through it, I was like, oh my God, I wouldn't have planned it that way if I had written the entire script.
And Jacqueline, in terms of Stargate SG1, was there any time where they came looking for you for a certain role, where you'd already booked a gig or booked an appearance on another TV show, where you had to maybe come back and reschedule for later on? Or was it just so convenient that every time that they looked for you, that just so and behold, there was an opportunity and that you were available for them?
Yeah, I was very lucky in that the timing always worked out. And I know that for some of the characters in Stargate, there were conflicts, and there's a lot of back and forth. Stargate would have definitely been a priority for me, because it was a very important show to me. I loved playing Nirrti. I always wanted to be there. The best set, one of the best sets I've ever worked on, for sure, and amazing people. So the combination of the character and the set environment and all of the great people, I would have made it a priority for sure. But I was lucky. I never had a conflict.
And I suppose, Jacqueline, that episode with the System Lords, in terms of that sort of double cross, in terms of Cronus and the Lord Ying, in terms of that's sort of memorable, because it keeps us in suspense in terms of who it might be, who it might be played out. And as actors and actresses, were you sort of, because it was, I think it was a two show episode, did you get the script for both 2 episodes, or was it the second episode that you were sort of revealed that you were going to be the one in terms of that did all this in terms of mayhem and damage and sort of trying to break the human Gouald alliance?
Yeah, no, they never reveal who does what in advance. You're not allowed to know, because they don't want anyone to leak some of the cool, story plot points that come up. They don't want any spoilers. But I will never forget that first episode with Ron Halder playing Cronus and Vince Cristejo playing you. And just honestly, the 3 of us working together, all of us had some theater background, those unbelievable costumes with some also very funny side effects, because if you remember the costume that you wore, he was in a very stiff kind of gown type thing, modeled after the actual kinds of costumes that they would have worn way, way back thousands of years ago. And just like thousands of years ago, you can't sit down in those costumes. So they actually had a little stool fashioned that you kind of tuck up under the skirt, and you sort of lean yourself back against a wall. So, but yeah, it was absolutely wonderful working with them. I love the fact that I was the deceptive one, because frankly, that's my favorite kind of character. You always want to play a character that has lots of subtext. Nirrti has lots of subtext. She's got lots of tricks up her sleeve. So there's always like a little play. Every scene, even if it seems simple, even if I don't know what the story is going to develop like in another episode in the future, I know that no question, Nirrti's got a secret, and she's working behind the scenes to probably make some mischief. So that's one of the best things about playing her too.
And I suppose, Jacqueline, some of your most prominent episodes were also the prominent episodes of Teryl Rothery, who played Dr. Janice Dr. Fraser, as well in Stargate SG1. And it almost felt like that you could feel that sort of estrogen bubbling between the both of you in terms of that sort of tension, that sort of dislike, and that sort of deep hatred. But did you find that both amusing and funny in terms of that? Playing that great sort of hatred there, dare I say, towards each other?
Well, I absolutely love Teryl Rothery. I love working with her. She's a wonderful actress. And the fact that it was tapping into that kind of mama energy, and Nirrti was sort of an anti-mama, like the destructive, trying to create life, trying to create the best life imaginable with the Haktar, and yet being so incredibly destructive. So I actually, there was humor. There's always humor in Stargate SG1, but I really loved facing off with her. And when she had a gun on me, like, I loved that moment. And because when you're working with an actress who's great and you're both invested, just to have that exchange of energy when you meet eyes, it's very powerful. It's very fun. Even if it looks serious, it's always it's just a great feeling to really, really be in the moment.
And Jacqueline, I spoke to Peter Williams there recently, and going back in the past, I spoke to a good lot of the guys who played Assistant Laura. I spoke to the late Cliff Simon as well. And one thing he struck to me about as well, that he said that the system lords who played the bad guys, so they mightn't have been in shows with each other often or half the time, but once the series ended, they developed a great sort of friendship, all of you together, and it's just lasted over time. And while some of the regular cast mightn't have been in regular contact with each other, the villains as such have come together and have formed this unity or this bond from the show, which is kind of unique, given that some of them weren't even on the set at the time. Was that very much the case for yourself in terms of that you developed friends for life?
Yeah, absolutely. When we did Continuum, that was my first encounter with Cliff Simon. And I felt like I was in the presence of one of the best actors I'd been around. He was incredible. I worked with Peter Williams on a few different shows. So I was familiar with Peter, but we were only on set together for Continuum for one day. And I didn't even have an exchange with Cliff on that day. I didn't meet Sue-Ann Braun until I think it was Oz. I think we did the Australian convention. And in fact, I was just looking through a few things, and this picture is of Cliff Simon, me, Peter Williams, and Sue-Ann. And I think this is from the
wow.
And this was probably the first time we met. And I think you can tell even from this picture, we had a connection that was undeniable. And Sue-Ann and Cliff had gone back a long way because of their, they've got a South African history together. And Peter is a Jamaican and my father was Jamaican, and we've known each other for 20 odd years in Vancouver working together. So we already had a connection, but the four of us together, there was some kind of amazing alchemy. I've never had so much fun on stage and conventions ever. I will miss Cliff forever.
And Jacqueline, in terms of Stargate SG1 and being involved in the series, I know your character was eventually sort of killed off, but you're supposed that you're never sort of dead and in this sort of world, and in terms of flashbacks, and I know there was an alternate world that Ball predicted and you were brought back. How exciting was that, Jacqueline, and in terms of that, and were you sort of hoping for these different alternate reality episodes to come along a bit towards the end of the few seasons that were left, maybe 9, 10 onwards?
Of course, I was just, it's like, well, you're dead, but are you? Because you are a god, and there's alternate realities, and there's alternate universes, and I can't tell you how much I hoped that there would be another iteration. As with Continuum, I came back, and it's like I just wanted more and more. I couldn't get enough of it, and as we know, the fans also haven't been able to get enough of it either. So I've always hoped that there would be more to play, and a lot of it has to do with the people, the energy, the people, the fact that that show was created and managed to, have such heart and also humor, and yet real kind of dangerous moments. It really hit a lot of notes that people wanted to keep revisiting. And as actors, that's all our favorite things too.
And Jacqueline Samuda, I know it's a busy time for you at moment as well, and you have other projects in the pipeline. You might enlighten our viewers or listeners in terms of where we might see you. I do believe you had a recent Hallmark movie that came out.
Yes, the Hallmark was called The Cases of Mystery Lane, and we are hoping that it's going to develop into a series. There's a lot of fan requests for that, and it looks like it's a possibility. And I play a really fun lawyer character who's the mom of the lead. And so it was a great show. If anyone has a chance to see a rerun of it on Hallmark or on W Network, The Cases of Mystery Lane. So that was a great one. And then I played a lawyer in a Virgin River episode that I think is coming up. I'm going to check on when. It should be very soon, actually. And I play a really kind of nasty lawyer. So some people will see Nirrti in her for sure.
And I suppose, Jacqueline Samuda, you have been to Britain before. You have been to England as well for various conventions. You're so close to Ireland. Is it on the bucket list sometime in the near future?
I cannot imagine going to England again without making a side trip to Ireland. I've always wanted to go to Ireland, always. So if I can get there, and if there's certainly a convention anywhere in that area and anybody wants to request me, that's always welcome.
Yeah. And Jacqueline Samuda, I'm going to finish now with the sort of hardest question. I'm going to leave it to last, and one to make you think. Let's pretend there was a Stargate encyclopedia, a sort of dictionary as such, and they put your character into the dictionary, Nirrti, and they left 2 blank sentences underneath it. And the talent agent got on to Jacqueline Samuda, who played the role of Nirrti, and asked, would she be able to write those 2 sentences, a synopsis of what Nirrti was about? Jacqueline Samuda, what would you like those 2 sentences to read to describe Nirrti?
Nirrti is a timeless goddess of Hindu origin who is to be feared for her fierce intellect and her unwillingness to compromise in the pursuit of science. So anything is up for grabs when it comes to developing, especially in the genetic fields of science. There are no safe areas. Nirrti will live forever in one way or another, whether it's through another universe or through her science.
Jacqueline Samuda, you definitely had your research done. Anyway, that came easy to you. It took Peter Williams for best part of 5 minutes a month ago. He was to and fro, going over back and forth. You had that off to a T anyway. So I don't know if you had a sort of an advanced sort of notice that was coming your way, but for the moment, Jacqueline Samuda, for me, Jim Conlan speaking to you on the airways. Thanks for joining us this evening. We wish you all the best in your future and projects for the rest of 2023. Thanks for sharing your memories. You played Nirrti in Stargate SG1. You were one of the most prominent female system lords of the Gouald, and no doubt revered, remembered, and forever rejoiced, and forever, dare I say, lingering to make a comeback. Wherever there's a sarcophagus in play, Nirrti will always be clinging on to hope. But for the moment, Jacqueline Samuda, stay safe, take care, and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.